what we're doing is we're moving x402 into the Linux Foundation. It's going to be a new JDF under the Linux Foundation. So it's kind of like the same level as the AIIF or any other kind of like broader mandate. Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust is another example, but these kind of like higher level groups oriented around a particular topic.
Welcome to the Coinbase Developer Podcast, a technical deep dive with top on-chain builders in crypto and beyond. I'm Yuga Cohler, engineering lead at Coinbase Developer Platform.
And I'm Erik Reppel, head of eng for CDP and author of x402.
Erik, so we recently had a really exciting announcement about the launch of the x402 Foundation. There's been a lot of buzz about this. Can you tell us a little bit about what this is?
Yeah, well, it's been a long time coming. The path that I've always envisioned for x402 is to start out at Coinbase and then to move into a foundation where it's not just Coinbase making the decisions, and then to move into some higher order governing body like the IETF. And so we've now hit kind of the first milestone of that. x402 has become a big thing, and so now it's time to move x402 into a broader foundation with multiple people at the table, multiple companies from around the industry involved. And I've been super, super excited to see all the participation by everybody and all the amazing companies that have signed up and expressed interest in helping bring x402 into the future. But to answer your question, what we're doing is we're moving x402 into the Linux Foundation. It's going to be a new JDF under the Linux Foundation. So it's kind of like the same level as the AIIF or any other kind of like broader mandate. Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust is another example, but these kind of like higher level groups oriented around a particular topic. And so x402 Foundation initially is focused on x402, but the vision is to really use it as the place to bring agentic commerce to life and to focus on what all the components of the life cycle that agentic commerce will need.
The word foundation kind of has a particular connotation in crypto. So this is kind of an important point to touch on, I think. So this is not, well, I actually don't know. I mean, the foundations I am familiar with in crypto are like the Ethereum Foundation or the Solana Foundation or some token foundation, but it sounds like this is something quite different.
Yes, this is a like bog standard open source Linux Foundation. You know, this is like a very like tech, not crypto thing. Like this is the kind of the de facto standard for how big tech companies run open source projects and coordinate across multiple projects. So the Linux Foundation also houses PyTorch and MCP and Next.js and React and all sorts of these like pieces of software that are just broadly used every day by millions and millions of engineers. And so the x402 is, I think this is kind of a misconception. x402 is really not a like crypto only thing. Like we think that stablecoins are an amazing payment rail, but for x402 to succeed, like we want all forms of payment to work on x402. And that's always been the intention. And there's little decisions that we've made kind of along the way that I think really indicate that. Like in x402, it's called a network because like payments could be done on any network. That doesn't imply fiat or crypto. We would have just called it a chain if we wanted it to be a crypto only thing. But we, from the start, have wanted x402 to be open, neutral, standard for payments, regardless of how the payment gets done.
So it's much more akin to open source software kind of thing with its own governance rules, many different players at the table helping to shape the future of this project, which makes sense, I think. Taking a step back, x402 has taken the world by storm in terms of its ability to facilitate payments on the internet. HTTP native has coincided with this rise in AI agents and excitement around agentic commerce. And it's, as you've alluded to, it sounds like you feel like this openness, this neutrality is really important to this area. And that's why you've made an effort to make sure that x402 turn into a foundation. So broadly philosophically, can you tell us your thinking behind that, why you think that's important, all the elements in consideration into this decision.
Yeah, so I grew up as a kid on the internet. Like I am very much like one of the first people from the first generation where the internet was a thing, and anyone could, download a web browser and then go to like any website, and anyone could publish a website, and that was awesome. Like I had friends who were making websites with like I think it was Adobe Dreamweaver back in the day, uh, and publishing them, and like when we were in like middle school, and that is like I think truly one of the most amazing feats of humanity is that the internet is like this open protocol that anyone can participate in. Like anyone in the world can get an internet connection and then publish a website, and then anyone in the world can go to that website. And it wasn't obvious that that was going to be the case, right? The kind of early incumbent on, networked connected computers, people sharing information was AOL. And AOL like kind of was this walled garden where it did a bunch of great stuff, but you had to kind of go through AOL and pay them a bunch of money to get your content listed on AOL. And that's like kind of the walled garden versus the open web is how I frame it. And the open web ended up being so much bigger because simply you cannot process like all the people who are going to want to do something if every website needs approval. I think there's like huge positive sum externalities to open that people just don't even account for. One of which is I don't think we get AI if we don't have the open web. If you look at all the AI models, they're just trained on the web. Like for better or worse, that is how the data was captured. That wouldn't have happened on mobile, right? Mobile is kind of more walled garden. There are good reasons why mobile needed to be a walled garden, in part because people didn't have the hardware to, do the thing. And so you needed people who would make custom hardware just for mobile. But it's not as if the LLM labs went and scraped all mobile applications because in order to generate the training sets. And part of the reason for that is like, A, you can't really scrape apps. They're not open. And B, there's like several orders of magnitude fewer apps than there are websites because you have to kind of go through the Play Store or the App Store to publish an app. And so I really want the agentic web to look much more like the open web than what mobile looks like. Because I think that it's almost impossible to predict why that will be valuable, but I just have such strong conviction that that is the right way for it to work.
It sounds like also you feel like payments is a big part of that. There's all these debates about at the model layer, the AI model layer, how open or closed that is. Obviously, OpenAI is itself a big subject of debate, but tell us a little bit about how you feel like the payments layer, why it's important for that to be open.
Ultimately, success of these kind of platforms lands on or is settled by whatever the dominant economic model is. Like the open internet won in part because it was open, and secondarily because Google built an amazing business complementing the open web. And Google and search results, and Google aggregated the open web and then provided a business model for everyone who published on the web, which was ads, right? And so ads became a hugely profitable business. Google built a massive $1 trillion business by embracing open and building a complementary business model for those open standards. And that's why it's going to be really important with agentic payments, is because it's clear that the most obvious business model for agents is actually just directly paying agents to do stuff for you. If payments are all done through like a singular party or one central player, that is like you're going to route all the traffic through like a single point of failure that's going to be able to rent seek or value capture or anything else. And so you want an open standard where anyone can provide payments infrastructure, and my model can talk to your model even if like the way that I handle money in my agent is different than the way that you handle money in your agent.
Yeah, that's a really compelling point about business models and how Google really shaped that way of the web and had the downstream effect of actually providing all this training data in the form of websites, or at least enabling the creation of them. Is it fair to say then, like, do you view the scope of the X402 Foundation and X402 not necessarily just limited to at least what is today the protocol, but to expand beyond that into all forms, all aspects that's going to figure out what it means to have an agentic internet, particularly as it ties to commerce and payments?
So I think it's fair to say the history of the internet is you build the open internet, W3C, CERN, etc. We have an attempt to create a walled garden with AOL, and then we have an embracing of the open technologies by Netscape and Google. Netscape built the first consumer grade browser, and so everyone now had a web browser. And then Google aggregated the internet and provided the business model, which was ads. And now, 20 years after that happened, there was enough data where we could actually train AI. That data wouldn't have existed if CERN didn't release the World Wide Web, if Netscape didn't, build the Netscape browser, if Google didn't go and index all that data and make it immensely valuable and generate an incentive and business model for people to continue publishing. And so I wonder what the story will look back on in 20 years about how the agentic web happened, what the equivalence will be.
Yeah, it's hard to know where in history we are. Hindsight is almost 2020, but when things are moving so quickly these days, it's really hard to know where we are in that arc of history. So is it fair to say, given how monumental, how colossal these changes taking place are, and they get to the heart of what the internet is, what the experience of being connected through networks is it fair to say then that the focus of X402 kind of goes beyond just the raw protocol itself, which is today centered around stablecoin-based payments, but can we expect in its future an expansion of the protocol itself and perhaps even beyond the protocol itself to facilitate exchange between agents at large?
I mean, this is ultimately up to the X402 Foundation at this point. It's no longer in my hands. My suggestion is, look, we have a really strong group of people that are the right people to set the standards for agentic commerce. And there's more aspects to commerce than just payments. And so I think that we need to have a layer of identity. We need to have a way of doing discovery and reputation. And there's all these other aspects of how are we going to solve this when agents start giving each other money, and adhering to values of privacy preserving, minimizing trust, making sure that, your agent isn't leaking your PII all over the internet. These are real concerns that we need to address because, as a business, you need to know, do you need to collect VAT? Do you need to collect sales tax? How do you actually operate as a business and declare this income if you're now making meaningful income from AI agents? My hope is the X402 Foundation can be kind of the body that starts all of these projects. And then I think hopefully we pass a lot of these things off to even higher order governing boards. The IETF does amazing work. The W3C does amazing work. There are existing standards and existing governing bodies that have a long track record of being excellent shepherds of the internet and the values of the internet I'm talking about. And so I'm not trying to control all of this and have X402 Foundation do all of it, but we need kind of an incubator for these things that can, go and invest and bootstrap and run the experiments.
Focusing back in on what X402 is today, there's been some discussion about crypto versus fiat rails, cards, and you mentioned this point about networks and the many meanings that word can have. What are your thoughts on in terms of how or if X402 can enable additional networks beyond the ones that it does today, which are generally focused on stablecoin-based payments?
The answer is yeah, 100%. There's no technical reason why not. We're actively working with a number of companies to make it happen. So more soon.
What are you, now that the foundation is launched, and we should note that the launch is on 402, April 2nd, very apropos. What are you most excited for in terms of what comes next, both for the foundation and the protocol?
I think the next thing I'm excited about is working with all of these partners to embed X402 everywhere and making it common standard that works anywhere that you want to do payments on the internet.
To your point about an open internet, I think you once told me a story about how the open internet actually is how you found out about Bitcoin, and how that really set you on a trajectory to where you are today. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
So when I was in middle school, high school, etc., I did two things. I played sports and I spent hours and hours and hours at my computer. And my favorite thing to do with the computer was use this browser extension called StumbleUpon. So StumbleUpon, fun fact, it was actually created by one of the co-founders of Uber before he co-founded Uber. StumbleUpon was this browser extension. I believe I was using it on Firefox at the time, but what it would do is just you click a button and it takes you to a random website, and then you could like or dislike the website. And I would spend hours just going to random websites on StumbleUpon. And one day I quite literally stumbled upon the Bitcoin white paper, like the PDF of the Bitcoin white paper. And then I like read the Bitcoin white paper and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I was like 16. And it is I think safe to say that I kind of stumbled into my career because of one, StumbleUpon, and finding the Bitcoin white paper on some random day when I was in high school. And there is no equivalent of StumbleUpon for apps in the App Store. You just can't do it. You can't go and index the App Store. You can't, dynamically take someone to an app. And that that ability of the internet to just anyone can build anything. Anyone can slice and index and distribute and build recommendations and all these things is so powerful, and has this is one of these externalities I talked about of you don't know that the open internet is going to lead to someone building a browser extension that takes you to random parts of the open internet, which is going to lead to some kid finding out his career. And anyone in my age range 30s ish, I bet you has a StumbleUpon story. It's for a lot of people, I tell this story and they're like, oh, that was a core memory. I remember using StumbleUpon all the time when I was in high school or middle school. And these are things that only work because it's all open. Everyone has access. Everyone can build on top of these things.
For sure. Yeah. For fellow millennials or late Gen Zers, I think there are a lot of core memories around this type of experience. It's interesting. I never used StumbleUpon, but I have a lot of similar experiences of just landing on these troves of interesting pages where there was Dragon Ball Z fan subtitled DVD rips or things like that really formed the essence of my late childhood, early adolescence. So it's really interesting to think about what the analog of that is going to be when dead internet theory comes true and it's mostly agents running around the web.
People say dead internet theory, and that's because one, it's harder than ever to produce stuff in many ways. It's nothing actually is as good as Dreamweaver was back in the day. And two, mobile has kind of pushed everyone to the points of attention are these aggregated, these vertically aggregated apps. It's everyone goes to Instagram rather than their web browser. And so if you're going to create stuff, you're going to create it for Instagram. And that's Instagram has far fewer dimensions of interesting complexity that you can express than the web browser does. But there's fundamentally, it's the same thing. You're creating interesting stuff other people are going to consume, whether it's a video or a website. And I think if you can get the agentic web onto open standards, you can have the same number of dimensions of interest for the agentic web. You could have a super interesting agent that you talk to and does all sorts of interesting stuff that you just stumble upon one day. But you need it to be, a more robust, open platform than, everyone is going to use AI through the big AI interfaces. Another one of these, me and my friends in high school were obsessed with this thing called the Tim Tang test. Do you know about the Tim Tang test?
No, never heard of it.
So it was this website this guy named Tim Tang made, and it had 26 levels. And each page in the website was basically a brain teaser on how to get to the next page. And so you had to understand the internet a little bit to use it. So, to get from the first page to the second page, each page was a level. It would give you a hint, and then it would be oh, you got to know a bit of lore, or the first time I ever saw HTML was inspecting the Tim Tang test website page because the next URL was in a comment in the HTML. And so it was like all these kind of like brain teasers that kind of like advanced you through this like maze of the Tim Tang test. And it was like super compelling and interesting. And we spent like weeks in high school trying to like get to different levels of it. And that's like, you can't do that on Instagram. There's not enough like dimensions of expressiveness.
There are so many degrees of freedom that it becomes, and the point is not to, but it becomes impossible to even project what is going to happen. But I do think, just to close it out, I do think there's something very romantic and very inspiring about a push to preserve this ethos of openness, of accessibility to the internet at a time where there's so much like secular war going on, philosophically, politically, but also technologically. Just there's a lot of like jockeying to either be the one entity that controls something, even, you know, if it's not put in those terms. And there's something very refreshing, I think, about x402 unabashedly trying to be, hey, let's create a new open ecosystem, because that's actually important to do in and of itself. Cool. All right, shall we leave it there?
Sounds great.
All right, well, thanks for listening to the Coinbase Developer Podcast. I'm Yuga Cohler signing off. Thanks to Erik Reppel, and please check out the newest launch of the x402 Foundation. Lots of exciting announcements to come there. Stay tuned. Lead the world's transition on chain by building with Coinbase Developer Platform. Visit us at cdp.coinbase.com. Follow us on X at Coinbase Dev, and be sure to leave us a review on your favorite podcast app.